And we're live. Hey, everybody. How are you? I hope you're doing well. I hope things are good wherever you're at, and that you are taking care of yourself as best you can. I've got something a little bit different, a little bit not writer's chatty again today, but I thought we would pick up and continue kind of talking about just general writing topics in place of just answering the usual questions. And so, guys, gals, non binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, dreamers, pantsers, plotters, scribblers, survivors, thrivers, spite livers, because that's a thing I just learned about. Anybody who's had to deal with just a lot of laundry, anybody who's nervous, anybody who's ever been nervous, people who discover like notebooks and post-it notes and stuff that you wrote a long time ago that you swore you would never lose that you suddenly refound. Anybody who's come across $1 or more in a pocket of clothing and felt really good about your day. And most importantly, the comrades. Hi, I'm John. I'm supposed to be normally answering your questions about writing right now. But today, I want to talk about stakes. I want to talk about one of those semi abstract concepts in writing and hopefully make them not abstract for you because they shouldn't have to stay abstract. They shouldn't have to stay difficult to understand or vague or just kind of one of those things where it's like you kind of wave your hand generally in their direction and you think that's good enough. I want to make stakes and building stakes and using stakes in your story to be a useful, practical exercise. I want to put some tools in the toolbox to help you just craft better, impactful, amazing, engaging stories of whatever kind, whether it's, your romance novels to your personal catharsis memoirs to your I don't know, to your kids' books, to your illustrated kids' books, to your sci fi epics, and everything in between. Stakes matter. And I want to take them out of the realm of, I guess I have them, and put them more squarely in the realm of, oh, yes, I have them. And here they are. So we've got a couple points to talk about. And I know if you're a longtime viewer, watcher, I don't know what to call it. If you've been around here before and you've either heard me talk or seen me do one of these things before, the number one complaint is, hey, you don't do enough examples. Well, good news. I brought a lot of examples today and we have plenty to talk about. So hopefully this will help you in whatever you're writing, learn from an example and build a tool from it and then take it off to your own work. I hope, in theory, possibly. We'll see. Stakes are stakes are one of those things where it's not what's called a first course writing, meaning you're not going to set up the stakes initially. It's not like characters or plot or world. Those are first course where you sit down and hash them out, and what you say they are is what they are, period. Stakes like theme and subtext and a few other terms are second course. You build them and develop them after we've set up the first stuff, because you can't really come up with stakes without first developing something or someone or somewhere to put them. If you build those first things, stakes are an easy next step and next evolution. And I want to show you how to do it because it's it's they shouldn't be mysterious. I've heard so many writers lately talk about like, well, stakes are only this, or you only get stakes with that, or the only way to do something with stakes is to do this. And all of that's not accurate. All of those are things you can do with stakes, but there's no one like stakes are only X kind of decision. Stakes are legion. Stakes are multitudes. Stakes contain multitudes. We could take this in a lot of different directions depending on what we want to do, but we can't do that without really setting up some structure so that you know what the hell you're talking about when you bring up your stakes. So here we go. We're going to start real simple with what are stakes? And I used these, all my title cards today are moments in a story where there are stakes either being developed or dealt with or under process or something. So here for part one, although the examples in part one are a little bit more broad, Lord of the Rings, the circle of Elrond here in Fellowship, where they're about to go put the ring on the little pedestal, and then Gimli's going to come and whack it with the axe, and everybody's going to argue, and then no one simply walks into Mordor. You know that moment. The stakes here are in the revelation post ring. Right now, the stakes are dialogic. They're just about talking. They're just about getting everybody together and wondering why the hell, Agent Smith from the Matrix has gathered us all together in our fancy bathrobes. The stakes in here are general. They're broad. We haven't nailed down the One Ring. We haven't nailed down, Mordor, and somebody's got to bear this thing, and the movie hasn't really popped off yet. So stakes are general, and that is one kind of stakes. We will talk about what that means more specifically coming up, but stakes are a couple different things. They refer to, if you really want like a technical discussion, the stakes are the potential for an outcome, good or bad, large or small, critical or unimportant, to happen. How likely is X going to happen? That's the basic definition of stakes. You could take that and go with it and just have that be your question you're answering for your plot, for your character, for your world, for your story, and you'd be fine. But I want to add more to it because it's not wrong. And you could do well with that. But if we have more information, we can make better decisions. We can craft better story. We can do better stuff. So let's add to our definition. How about stakes also refers to the amount of risk it is necessary in order to do something to get a goal we want. So I have to work X hard to make that thing happen, or I have to scramble out of this trench, run across the battlefield, and go over there to take the next military objective. The amount of risk or danger, however we want to quantify that, whether it's I risk my life, or the city of Gotham needs a hero, or it's, there's a danger of me cutting my, thumb with a knife as I make a sandwich. There's always an amount of risk. It doesn't always mean physical danger, but there's a risk somewhere. The amount of that risk, stakes. Now let's go one extra step, just one more with me. There's a chance, just like there's a chance that we could do something right. We could take the ring to Mordor. We could make a sandwich successfully. We could do lots of different stuff like that. There's also a chance that it could go badly, that, Sauron could, spread darkness across the land, that I could, I don't know, hack off my hand with a bread knife, that bad things could happen. So stakes are also the threat or possibility of a bad outcome, an undesirable outcome to happen if we do something or don't do something. And don't sleep on that lack of action, because there's always that chance, even though it'll kill the narrative, it'll wreck our story. If we have characters just kind of sit there and do nothing, if they're main characters, like if Frodo and Sam don't walk across New Zealand, the story's not happening. But inaction isn't only just characters not doing the plot. Inaction is characters, let's say secondary characters, looking at Brody and Quint, because Hooper isn't in the story yet, in Jaws, and wondering why Brody wants to close the beach for 4th of July. They have, needs. They got to keep the hotel open. They got to get customers in because it's summer, and amity means friendship. And that inactivity on their part leads to something bad, the shark chewing on more people. So stakes are about potential, and they're about risk, and they're about possibility. Stakes are an abstract term for organizing information. Now, let's address some of the elements that the #writing community uses when it comes up with stakes. Here are the things that stakes are not. They're just not. Maybe you could make them this way in certain contexts, or set them up in certain ways because of the kind of story you're framing or other parts of the story that you're going to bolt onto this. But to call a few things just stakes because they are this thing is inaccurate. Stakes are not a description of how hard the plot is. A difficult plot does not necessarily have high stakes or low stakes or any stakes at all. It's not a difficulty slider. It's not a video game. Stakes are also not an indication of how dangerous the bad guy is. The wizard in the tower who can throw fireballs all over the world, or the magic item doohickey, or the evil Nazi or whatever, they're real bad guys. Not there's no debate about that. But just because that guy is super powerful doesn't mean that that's the stakes of the story. That's just a character who has abilities. Stakes are also, if we move away from character, they're not a discussion of how quickly everything should happen. It's not an indication of the story, is moving at a certain rate of speed or a certain rate of page turning. And it's also not an indication as to how quickly you want the reader to turn those pages. It has nothing to do with readability. It has nothing to do with how quickly or confidently the reader does anything other than read. Stakes are a story internal element. They refer to just the fiction and the imagination within cover to cover. Has nothing to do with the reader's engagement with literacy. And lastly, stakes are not an indicator of how much, golly gee shucks, your character wants to win, or have the good guy come out ahead, or have the bad guy come out ahead. Stakes are not a quantity of want. Oh gosh, it would be really great to have, an attractive human bring me a sundae right now. I really want that. That would be great. That is not the stakes of me making this recording for you. They're just different things. Don't limit stakes like that. Stakes are potentials and possibilities and threats and risk. Abstract things, big, broad. I'm making sweepy hand gestures here. Let stakes be abstract, at least for a few more slides. So we can track and measure stakes, not in quantifiable numbers, although I will often work with somebody, and at least to give them a sense of how to organize a scene, I will put numbers to it, but that's just me trying to express an idea to them. How that number translates into their story. If I say, oh, I think the stakes here should be a 6. That 6, I'm making air quotes, is not a universal thing. It's not like my 6 now is my 6 forever. And you reading it might go, oh, this is clearly an 8. The numbers have no bearing whatsoever other than me sort of laying it out one time. But stakes measure connection between what the character is doing, what the character wants to do, and any and all forces that push in or press against what that character's doing or wanting to do. We can quantify and develop stakes, not in terms of like, it's a 10 and it's a 1, but we can quantify stakes by asking questions. So here are some questions you can ask to help you develop stakes. And I've centered the character here because I think that's the easiest way to understand. Because all stakes stem from, or at least the majority of stakes, stem from somebody's position, somebody's point of view. Now, that somebody might be a single person. It might be one main character, or the antagonist, or the love interest, or something. But that one point of view might also be the whole city with its millions of people, or the group of bad guys, or a collection of people, but it's still functioning as one unit, one item of person, one point of view. Here are our questions. We're going to start with the biggie and work our way down. Question 1 would be, how important is what I'm doing, whatever it is, to me? Is it a big deal? Is this very important to me? Followed by, how much do I want to be doing something else at the time I'm doing this first thing? I really want that sundae. I do not necessarily want to be working today. How big a deal is that other want, that other interest? But then we can get more practical about it. When I do this thing, whatever the thing is, this job, this task, this goal, this plan, what do I stand to gain? What do I want? What's my reward? What's driving me forward? What do I want to gain here? If I do this, what am I getting? It's transactional, but sometimes framing your stakes as transactional helps ground it and connect it to the character. I'll do that tough job, but you better pay me. I better not die. That would really suck. There's frequently, because it's not an always kind of thing, there is frequently a benefit to thinking about what a character stands to gain. Likewise, the opposite is true. What am I risking to do what I'm doing? If I go, run across no man's land to go fight in this battle, what am I risking and how big a deal is that to me? Well, you could get killed. Well, that really sucks. So it seems like a very large risk. This is not the same as me, sliding a paperclip across my desk because you asked me for one or passing you the salt at dinner. The risks as well as the rewards are factors that help illustrate how important or how pressured or how urgent or how something the want or goal or activity feels to the character. But let's spill this out and quantify it. Let's, instead of making it purely transactional, let's tap feelings or bolt feelings onto that transaction. How badly do I, the character here, want the outcome to go my way? How badly do I want to win this contest? How badly do I want to succeed? Is it a real big deal? Is it a tiny deal? Ignoring for the moment how hard I think it's going to be. That is a separate issue. Just, is it really important to me that I win? Do I have to win the state spelling bee? Do I really have to walk all the way across New Zealand? Is that a big deal? Or let's flip it around the other way. How badly do I want the outcome to go the way I want versus the other ways it could go? Well, I guess I better do this and be burdened with glorious purpose because the alternative is, darkness being spread across the land. Again, we're still thinking somewhat transactionally. We're still thinking somewhat selfishly. We're still positioning it in and around what a character or a group of characters or a collection inside a point of view wants or focuses on. But it's still a really great way of understanding the stakes when it comes to part of a story. The detective solving a murder, the stakes are solving the murder is good. It reduces, it prevents the killer from striking again or the killer from going unchecked. It solves a mystery that's in front of us, and it brings some level of personal and job satisfaction for having caught the killer. Those are the stakes, but we lens them not in terms of the abstract notion of justice. I am a crime solver, therefore I will solve crimes, for it is the right thing to do. We frame it more in terms of the person doing the actions, because that's who the reader is going to connect with. Now, if I've said all that stuff and that seems really like a lot to you, you can summarize this very simply with, do I care? Does the reader care about whatever it is? Does the reader really care in this moment? Do they have to rappel down the side of the mountain? Should they go after their kidnapped friend? Should they become a pirate and sail the seven seas? Do they care? If yes, great. How much? If no, great. Why? But we qualify and quantify and develop stakes, persons, for people, for groups. We'll break those down more specifically with greater examples that I think really illustrate the point to help you get it in your head. But don't think of stakes without thinking of the person or the group or the function or the goal sort of in mind. They don't float in a vacuum. They connect to stuff. So now we're going to talk about types of stakes. This, by the way, this title card is a screenshot from Clue, which is a movie that very much makes its stakes very apparent because it's a board game, and the stakes in a board game are, I want to win the board game, and I want to figure out who did the killing and who got away with it and what happened. Very logical, procedural thing turned into a really, really fun movie. So there are 6 kinds of stakes. Really, it's 3 sort of classes of stakes split into parts. And we can think about this pretty quickly and pretty effectively. There are public stakes. Public is a misleading word. We'll talk about it in a second. Personal stakes and global stakes. And for each of those, there's internal stakes and external stakes. Always internal, external, no matter what it is we're framing. And we can kind of summarize this with the public stakes. Don't think of public like group. Think of public like the moment currently being experienced. What does the immediate moment want? It helps answer the question, how are the people right here in this moment, on this page, in this scene, right here, how are they going to get through this? There's an internal and an external. A person or personal stakes is specific to one character. There's an internal of how do I feel, and an external of what do I show the world. Notice how there's sort of tension baked right in there. Tension helps make stakes feel real. Because if you can't craft that tension, if you can't figure out how to push and pull and coil that spring and give it a sense of just a little bit of unease or a little bit of discomfort, the stakes aren't going to feel very practical. It's going to stay abstract, and the reader's going to have a hard time connecting. Character, internal and external, also called personal. I know them as public, personal, and global, but you could easily say, immediate, character, and story, and you'd just be fine. And then lastly, there's the global, which is the big picture, the biggest picture. Usually this has to do with the plot, but mostly it's the biggest picture if you zoom all the way out. This is the city. This is the overall story. This is the kingdom. This is saving Middle Earth. This is the biggest view we've got. And we can summarize that with how do the people involved, and presumably they're going to be more than the public usually, how do the people involved in the big picture get through all this? So let's walk through some of each of these and we'll see what's going on, and we'll see how to kind of bring these up and put these in story. We're going to start with public internal stakes. So I've got an example here, a moment from the movie Clue, where after the lights go out and a gunshot goes off and stuff, they discover all our cast, our protagonists, our characters, our public, discover the dead body, a gun on the floor, and everybody's sort of spaced out. The lights had gone out, guy got killed. The public internal stakes ask the question, how will the people in this scene, so that's all these individual folks, how do the people in this scene collectively as a group react to, oh my God, there's a dead body, and interact with each other because of it? Miss Scarlet has the candlestick. Professor Plum is currently leaning over the couch. Mrs. White is pushed up against I guess that's a dresser or a shelf of some kind. Mr. Body is laying on the ground because he's the body. There's all these different interactions of characters and actors. There's all these different interactions between the members of this public experience. But also, they're all reacting individually while interacting collectively, because they have to interact with each other. But each of their interactions, although it can all be grouped as, oh my God, a dead body, they're specific. The specifics of Colonel Mustard over there by the lamp is different than Miss Scarlet, or different than Mr. Green, who's got his back to the camera sort of at the bottom of this frame. Think about public internal stakes in terms of sort of a group that you've roughly sort of collected and lassoed together. They're going to interact and jostle with each other, but they're also going to react as a unit to everything that's going on. Because the other side of public internal stakes are public external stakes. Now, with here, still in Clue, we've gathered a few more people, but now there's a guy at the door who's interrupted their, oh my God, there's a dead body, what are we going to do moment. So the group collectively moves as one to go to the door to kind of tell this new guy to beat it so that they don't get discovered for, the murder and whatnot. Public external stakes answers and challenges the question, how will the current moment or the current problem, like, hey, there's a dead body in the other room, how will that moment connect, vibe with, press against, bounce around with, interact with the outside world? So On this side of the doorway where all the people are in our group, there's been a murder and they've got to solve it. But the outside world, it's a stormy night in the mid 50s. I think it's in New England. But, you know, it's the internal structure and the internal moment versus the world here. So what does that group have to portray or develop to fit in with everybody else, or not give away the problem they have, or interact more effectively or anything like that? Again, we're back to that push-pull dynamic. Here's a group. How does the group bounce around relative to the outside world? Public stakes are of the moment, because the moment's always going to change. We're going to turn the page. We're going to go to a different chapter. We're going to have a different problem. Those stakes are relative because things will change later. They do accrue. So the stakes from, chapter 3 roll into make, the complications in chapter 5 or whatever. But there's still that idea of their moment to moment, even though we end up chaining and stapling together all our moments. Let's look at something more, I think, a little bit more understandable for people. Let's look at personal internal and personal external stakes, and we'll do it with one of the clearest examples I could think of, the very famous "I love you, I know" moment in Empire Strikes Back. Personal internal stakes, and we're going to do this first from Princess Leia's perspective because she's kissing Han Solo here. Personal internal stakes are of the moment. Here's what's going on. And they're going to try to address the questions of how urgently do I act on what I feel? And what's motivating my action or actions? So your character in this situation, in the context with everything going on, they feel a certain way. Maybe they feel a lot of different things. You don't just want to write a sentence like Bob was sad, because while that might be accurate, it does not necessarily convey a great deal of stakes. It doesn't really do anything, and it's hard to move away from Bob was sad to really develop the next idea. So we want to drill into that sadness. We want to really get into that feeling. So here she is, Princess Leia. She's feeling all these things. We're about to go watch Han Solo get frozen in carbonite. It's a real bad day for him. And she's got, been fighting with him and bantering with him for about a movie and a half now. And she's got feelings for him. And what does she do? How does she express that? She can't go on a big giant monologue. This is supposed to be a tense moment in the story, and he's going to get chucked into carbonite. So her personal question, her personal internal stakes, what's going on inside her is, trying to answer this question of, I feel a certain way. I'm in love with this guy. What do I do? And how quickly do I express that, do something about it? Because any second now he's going to get thrown into carbonite, and who knows what's going to happen to him then. I don't even know what's going to happen to me next. So I've definitely got very high stakes here. And because I'm feeling afraid, I'm feeling, like this could be my last time to see this guy. I'm feeling like, everything, I could get killed any second. There's very high stakes, very high danger, a lot of uncertainty kind of floating around here. So that's motivating me kissing this scoundrel and then telling him that I love him. Personal internal stakes, I think, are the easiest things for writers to get a handle on, because it only requires you to think like your character in the moment. Here's my character. They're in this spot. Here's the problem they're facing. Here's the conflict they're facing. Here's the action they want to take. How big a deal is it? What are they going to do next? But let's come over here to the other side, the personal external stakes. And this time we're going to flip the scene around, and we're going to come at this from Han Solo's perspective, because he's just about to tell her that, she says, I love you. And he says, I know, because, he's Han fucking Solo. But personal external stakes are, I have my own feelings. The princess just kissed me. We've been bantering for a movie and a half now. Who knows what's going to happen to me? I'm about to get thrown into carbonite. Who knows what could happen? I might never see these people again. I've lost everything that matters to me. But I also don't want to be a blubbering idiot. I don't want to sit here and just sob and beg for my life, because I'm Harrison Ford. I'm Han motherfucking Solo. I have to, hold my shit together. So I can't display my feelings the way that perhaps, a more sensitive person would. So the external stakes question, comes up that how do I show the world what's most important to me in this moment? What brave face do I put on? What display do I make so that other people, see, oh, that's how Han Solo feels in this moment. That's what the character says. This is the most important thing. Everything else can go kick rocks just for a paragraph or two. But this is their most important thing. So this is what they take action on. This is what's motivating them. This is the most core thing, which in this moment is Han Solo being a badass and just saying, I know. And then whoosh, getting taken off into carbonite. External stakes are a little bit trickier on the personal level because you've got to think about the distance, the gap, I guess you could say, between I have feelings and maybe I don't want to show them. Or I have feelings and I don't entirely 100% want to be transparent in expressing them for story reasons, because the Darth Vader and the Empire are like hovering blurrily over there behind me. Maybe they'll just shoot me. Or I have a personal code that says I don't express a lot of feelings. I hold them all in. I bottle them up. So I don't want to violate that personal code. I can't do it. So instead I will just make my statement a big reveal, even though it's very few words. And understanding that your character does not always need to be 1000% transparent. I feel sad, and here is a monologue. I'm in love with you, and here's 5,000 words of dialogue. Understanding that your character can hold things back, spoken, because you can go into the character's head in internal development, in exposition, in thoughts, and write out what the character is thinking so the reader knows. And what the reader comes to discover by reading what the character is thinking and feeling is that the stakes for the character are amplified, are heightened, are affected by the fact that this dude's only going to say, I know, and then whoosh, he goes off to carbonite. But the I know is sort of the very tiny opening that's holding back the massive floodwaters of however deep and complex the feelings might be. External stakes are about how the personal stakes of a character interface and connect with or butt up against the outside world. External stakes are always about taking the internal and getting it outward, whereas the internal stakes are almost always going to be some kind of reaction to what's going on around them. So it's reaction and exposure, or reaction, and if we want to use the fancy technical term, it's reaction and revelation. Those two push and pull, semi-magnetic, semi-adhesive concepts give us a chance to make stakes more than just must solve problem, must stop bad guy. And they give our story a much needed kick in the ass for depth. But let's go over here to sort of a bigger picture stuff. Let's go talk about the global stakes. We're back in Star Wars, only now we're in Rogue One, because I could not think of a better global internal setup. So this is the moment where Cassian Andor is giving a fairly lengthy monologue here, talking about spies and saboteurs and how once you commit to the cause, you commit to the cause, and the cause is great because rebellion and fighting fascism is ideal. So your story, just like in Rogue One, has stuff happening. Stuff's been happening for about an hour and change, hour and 40 something minutes, I think, by the time this speech rolls out. It might even be longer. I'm not entirely sure exactly. But while your story's been going on, lots of stuff has happened to loads of different people and group dynamics, whether that's families, best friends, coworkers, romantic relationships, two guys, two buddy cops, whatever that might be. Those internal conflicts and those internal reactions to what's been happening have been shaped and affected by what's been going on big picture wise. So here, the rebellion is, trying to come to terms with the fact that they're about to go on, like a suicide mission, a one-way trip in order to accomplish their goal. But that's what needs to happen because the goal is more important than their individual lives. It'd be great to not die, but hey, it's more important that we carry forward our idea. Global internal stakes poses the question, how does each group, whether that's the two people in love in your romance novel or the fantasy party or the who knows what, how will the group hold itself together? Gandalf dies. What happens to the fellowship? He demands that they run, and they do, and then everybody cries. Excuse me. How does the group hold itself together based on what's going on? Do they fall apart? Do they fight? Do they bicker? Do they double down? Do they split apart? What happens? How does the group continue to be a group or not relative to what's going on? But then we can go big picture, where most writers have no trouble going. The big picture. So here, more Rogue One, we are about to go do all the Rogue One things. There's a big, huge space battle between the Rebellion and the Empire. Global external stakes are, what's the big picture? Well, there's the Empire, there are the rebels, they're fighting, they're going to get the plans for the Death Star, et cetera, et cetera. What's risked is from both sides' perspective. The Rebellion risking their lives trying to do the thing to liberate the galaxy. What's risked on the Empire side? Control, power, the strength of their position. What's wanted? Again, both sides. The Rebellion wants freedom. The Rebellion, more specifically, wants the Death Star plans because that's part of the plot. But there's both sides want something. The Empire, what do they want? They want the rebels gone. They want to reassert control. They want to make sure there can be no future rebels. So risk, want, big picture. Most of the time, writers, especially when they're drafting early work, they're only thinking global external. Well, they got to save the kingdom. We have to fulfill the prophecy. We have to, save the village from the attackers or whatever it might be. We have to have two characters fall in love and, come to discover that they, enjoy each other naked in a romance novel, whatever it is. Global external stakes, probably the easiest thing in the world to do because all you have to do to get there is just zoom out and think about the breadth of story. In the same way that personal internal stakes are also simple because you just have to sit down and think about what your character wants and what they're trying to do and what they're feeling in a moment. Those two things, personal internal and global external, are usually where the conversation around stakes stops. We just don't go any further, and we should. I would argue that we need to, because there's so much more we could get for our stakes. There's so much more juice in the fruit. We could extract so much more to make our stakes feel more developed and make our story feel so much more concrete and so much more, organized. So now I'm using a shot of the Karate Kid, even though I don't have enough Karate Kid examples for this. But we're going to talk about how stakes function. Like, what do they actually do in the story? We've talked about what they are. We've talked about their types. But what do they do? Why is it a big deal? Why are stakes a thing that people are just kind of circling around and think that, it's only about killing somebody or dropping a body count? Stakes serve a critical function. And pretty much they're a measuring device. They are a device to measure action and criticality. Remember earlier how I talked about you could summarize all this down to, does the character care? How big a deal is it? Action is an action. It's what the character does or what happens, because actions aren't only characters. Some actions are environmental. The volcano explodes, the plane runs out of gas, something like that. Or just the rainstorm happens and Jurassic Park is plunged into darkness. Actions, what characters do or what the world has happened. Actions. Other technical term is something called criticality, which is how important is the action that just happened to the moment as well as the big picture. So if we go back to the title shot, this is the moment where, for the first time, once Daniel learns he's been learning karate the entire time he's been doing like domestic chores, this is the first time he sees the crane kick in the movie. And this beautiful soundtrack moment where all of a sudden we go from this sort of lighthearted thing to like this serious Zamfir pan flute solo when he sees Miyagi doing the crane kick. So the criticality here is how important is that moment, or how important is the action, that's Daniel seeing the crane kick, to the moment? Well, it gives him something to ask about in the next scene. It gives him something to wonder about. It gives him some further insight into, well, I've been learning karate, so I guess that's karate too. But now we also have to look at the overall big picture. The crane kick is how the movie ends. He crane kicks the blonde kid in the face. The crane kick becomes this hugely important thing. So the criticality of this moment where he first sees the crane kick is really high, because if we don't see the crane kick here, it's going to not work as an ending down the road because it's going to come out of nowhere. Criticality is how important an action is at the point where it exists for the first time, as well as in the great scheme of things, the sequence of things, the overall big picture. And again, like we talked about way back, we don't measure this in terms of like, this is a 10, this is a 2. You can, but keep that mostly to yourself. Like, it's not going to translate to other human beings. They're going to have their own scale and their own sense. And it's not an agreed upon publishing thing. It's not like publishing all says, this is what a 5 is and this is what an 8 is. It's more a sense of how you feel and how well you express it. If you say it's an 8, if you say this is a 3, you've got to do some amount of writing, some amount of development on the page to make sure that you are using I'm going to say the word correct, but I don't mean quantity, the correct number of words. It's not like 11 words is better than 10, but you want to make sure you write it down in such a way that it comes across as what you think a 3 is, or what you think an 8 is. Is it a big deal? Is it not a big deal? That's criticality. And criticality is fueled by actions. Who does stuff or what happens? Measuring that, we call that stakes. So why do stories have stakes? What do they do? They keep the story engaged. They keep everything kind of held together. They are adhesive. So stakes are a way to track what's happening and how big a deal it is, but it also gives our stories some sort of momentum. Because if there's no stakes and nothing's a real big deal, we're just kind of reading stuff, waiting for something to happen, which is a situation you don't want to put the reader in, because they'll get bored. They'll not understand, especially if you've written it very loosely or broadly and you're unclear. And I'm not talking like you need to describe the curtains better, or you need to have 5 more adjectives about like the dining room table or something. I mean, if you can't illustrate or express to the reader why the event that they're reading about is important for the people it's happening to, you're going to lose the reader in the long term. It won't be immediate. It's not like I read one more sentence and throw the book away. But there's definitely a sense of, I don't understand why this is a big deal. I'm kind of bored by this. I'll stop reading the book. Stakes are a way to track intensity and urgency in wanting a goal. How bad do they want to do a thing? And stakes help connect different layers of story, because there are multiple layers to a story. And if you're somebody whose understanding of layers to a story kind of stopped somewhere around school, where you probably had a teacher at some point tell you that you have to read into story and look for the layers and look for the depth, they did a huge disservice, because they really badly explained that kind of thing. Because this is not where I tell you that, oh, you know, that butter dish from chapter 10, that's really, you know, it's describing the state of women's suffrage or some abstract nonsense like that. It does not have to do that. That's not what this is about. Stakes are a sense about what's risked and how big a deal bad stuff is. That's sort of the simple way. But how big a deal anything is to the people involved is probably a better way to think about stakes. And stakes help connect the narrative, that's the stuff that happens in the story, with the subtext. Subtext is the first layer under the narrative. That's where your theme hangs out. That's where your narratological devices of intention and suggestion and emotive fuel. That's basically the very fancy way of saying, I'm reading this story about, two hobbits, walking across a place and disposing of jewelry, but really it's a story of, overcoming the odds, believing in yourself, resisting temptation, um, it's an allegory because depending on what you read, it represents World War II or World War I or the horrors of war or the horrors of personal temptation or something like that. All those subtextual things, all those things that the story could be about that isn't just recapping the plot, stuff like that, that's subtext. And the stakes of our story help connect our subtext to our narrative so that they're not just these disjointed, abstract, navel gazing kind of conversations in and around a made up story of made up people doing made up things. So let's walk through how stakes affect our narrative elements. We'll go characters, plot, and world. Okay. Mouthful of water, and here we go. So, stakes and character, I think, are the easiest way to kind of get the ball rolling here because we most often think about stakes in terms of character. That's not wrong. That's not overly simple or elementary. I think it's a really good starting place for story. And I think it's a great place for writers to start because it's something they know. They know their characters to some degree, especially their main characters. So, here's what stakes do. Stakes give character momentum. It helps them, it helps you convey to the reader, explain why they're doing what they're doing. It's a big deal. That's why they're rushing. It's a big deal. That's why they're doing it. It's not that big a deal. It's why we're kind of leaving that, this other idea to the side. It gives a story and gives a character momentum. But stakes also serve to give boundaries. Because if we know that throwing the ring in the volcano is a big deal, we are not going to stop, or at least maybe we shouldn't stop, to have a lengthy discussion about like, oh, I also was thinking about breeding horses. And then we have a little subplot where all of a sudden we stop somewhere in Rohan and breed horses. Boundaries, limitations might be a better word, help keep the story focused. I'm not saying that you need to focus the story so rigidly or so narrowly that the only thing that makes it onto the page is the character only doing the plots. The only doing, I guess, the main plot stuff, probably the easiest way to say that. This isn't that. This isn't about making the story so thin that it's only this one plot and it's done as quickly as possible. But it's also about not making the story so broad, so wide, that we cover a million characters and a million plots and a ton of other stuff with all this detail and lore. And we're just writing to write to masturbate ourselves with how smart we are. Stakes provide boundaries and what's called a character vector. They're going to move in this direction towards this goal at this rate of speed. Stakes also, if we're going to get a little more nuancy, stakes provide depth. Because if a character believes destroying the ring is important and they're acting and going in that direction, it reveals something about who the character is and what, not just what they want in terms of I want to destroy the ring, but it speaks to their nature. I'm the sort of person who wants there to be a better world, which means a weapon of mass destruction, that is the One Ring, needs to be destroyed. Understanding that depth and understanding that we can develop depth in our characters by giving the stakes to a situation or to a plot or to a goal or to an idea is one of the ways we can sort of give a third dimension to things without coming up with extra story. It's not like all of a sudden we have to give every hunky bad boy a troubling backstory in a romance novel. If what we could do is just explain to the reader and express through the character that the reason why our male love interest is, having so many arguments with their coworker in chapter 11, it's because really they're frustrated and angry about losing the female love interest a chapter and a half ago. Stakes have the potential to reveal character nature, what they believe, what they feel, what they think, how they act and should act in the world. That's incredible depth. But this relationship isn't only one way. It's not just stakes affecting character. Character also affects stakes, because characters give stakes purpose. Because if we just say it's important for the character to do this, that's really vague. But if all of a sudden we say it's important for Frodo to destroy the ring and not give in to temptation, all of a sudden those stakes feel like we've tailored them to Frodo. Or Han Solo has to tell Princess Leia that he loves her because this might be the last moment they see each other. Characters give stake purpose and make them practical. Characters are also the only way we can have stakes be achievable. So if our goal is to, save, get off Jurassic Park, get on the boat and not have the dinosaurs run amok, the character is urgently making it for the boat before the guy from Seinfeld destroys everything. Character actions are the only way stakes become achievable. Otherwise, they just remain these abstract ideas of it's important. Right, but nobody's doing anything about it. So how important is it really? And lastly, from a reader perspective, characters use stakes and how urgently or motivated they might be to keep the reader turning the page and staying in the story. If you're reading a story, you, the human listening to this, are reading a story and you know why the character is doing something and you want to see them succeed, you're engaged. You're in. You're trying to imagine this movie in your brain. That's partially because of the stakes. There are other factors like description and all that, but stakes are one of the ways we keep reading and we stay reading. Let's dig in a little deeper. Plot and stakes are natural companions. Stakes give plot momentum because it's the thing that is the big deal or not the big deal. You can't really have a plot be a plot without stakes. Stakes can also make a plot more substantial. They make it matter, because otherwise it's just, oh, that's a thing. Oh, it's a sandwich. Yeah, but whoever eats the sandwich is granted, 1,000 extra years of life, or whoever gets the sandwich first wins $1 million. All of a sudden, the thing, the object, becomes much more important, and the plot of I better get the sandwich before everybody else does matters. Also, stakes have a way of keeping your plot focused. We know why we're doing this thing, whatever it is. It's important, and we keep doing only the important things. We don't suddenly detour off for, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100,000 words just because. Stakes give focus. Other side. Because remember, not a reciprocal relationship. Plot affects stakes. The plot kind of tells us what the stakes can or can't be. If we're trying to fight the Empire, we know that we are not also going to have a lengthy discussion about moisture evaporators. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't make any sense. We're not going to suddenly get into, the Empire was built upon trade disputes, because that doesn't matter right now in this moment. But plot also helps stakes feel important. It's a big deal because we can see the evidence of it. In the same way, it also makes it practical. We know it's a big deal to fight the Empire because here comes the Star Destroyer ready to blow us up. Plot and stakes marry together very effectively. A lot of writers don't have a hard time coming up with like very specific situational stakes. Hey, here comes the Star Destroyer going to blow us up if we don't do something, or if we don't steer away, we're going to crash into the thing. Like those are easy ways to get somewhere in a story and move things forward. But if we're looking to create tension, if we're looking to do more than that, we have to go deeper. We have to look at characters, or we have to look at world. because your world building isn't just like the flat stage, the holodeck space where we've made up our story. Stakes give your world a sense of reality. Why is it a big deal that the volcano just exploded? Why is it a big deal that we get off this island before the volcano erupts again? Why is it a big deal that we pay attention to this part of the world right now as opposed to that part of the world? Stakes give boundaries, stakes give reality, and stakes help codify the rules of your world. Remember, when we're building worlds, one of the first things we want to do is figure out how the world works. Here are some basic rules for our world. It has these things, it doesn't have those things. You know, there are social classes, there's this, there's the kingdom, there's the princess, there's the palace, there's the peasantry, there's the farm, there's the nobles, whatever it might be. Those rules are just things you imagined. They're just stuff you made up. That's important to you because you made it up, but it doesn't become a critical story element until we can associate some kind of stakes with it. Yeah, who cares that there's a princess? Oh, well, we're going to care that there's a princess when, you know, this bad thing happens or this good thing happens. Stakes help cement and codify the rules of your world. Likewise, we flip it around. The world makes your stakes possible. And the world gives your stakes a reason to be stakes. Most critically, though, because of how you've built your world, even if it's just this is the small town in which our two characters fall in love, or this is the small town where the vampires attack and it's up to these kids to fight back, or whatever. The way you've built your world gives a chance for those characters to react to the stakes. It's a big deal because the world is set up the way that it is. That is a very undervalued and underappreciated point when it comes to developing stakes. Your world isn't just a flat thing where it's like, oh yeah, I walk into the room and then I do stuff. That room is material. That room matters. That room is a choice the character made to go into. Not just, well, I was writing the story and that was a room I wanted to write. That's fine if that's part of it, but that's no way all of it. Don't neglect your world building when it comes to your stakes. Let's blur some lines and go one more step. Okay. Let's talk about stakes in the theme. Theme, we've talked about before. Theme is that connective tissue that helps the reader look at your story and go, oh, this is the point. This is what I should take away from it. This isn't just a plot summary recap of made up people doing made up stuff. There's a value to this. Stakes give your theme urgency. Stakes give your theme a kind of importance. And it's the stakes that allow your story points to stand out. The reason why your climax is a big deal is because it's where the stakes are. And it's because it's the moment where the stakes can be dealt with and expressed. And if you tie your theme to your climax, like most stories should at some point in some way, it's the stakes that allow your theme to give you that extra, fuck yeah, I did it moment for your characters. And without stakes, it's really hard to illustrate that your story is important to the people in your story. Why are they doing what they're doing? Has to stretch and go beyond just the fact that you, the author, wrote them doing stuff. Yeah, well, they could go get sandwiches. They could go get stuck in traffic. Why are they doing the things they're doing? Stakes help illustrate that. Your theme, let's go kick the blonde kid in the face to learn how to believe in ourselves, helps our stakes rise and fall. We'll talk about rising and falling and raising and lowering stakes in a second. But we give a chance to let our stakes modulate and be affected because of our theme. Well, we kick the kid in the face, we win the karate tournament. He's not going to bully us so much anymore. In fact, he's going to get a Netflix series, so it must be good. Theme also helps your stakes stay present. It's a big deal. We're doing it right now. We're talking about it right now. So this must be the moment where the theme matters. I'm not bringing this up so that 2 hours from now I'll bring it up again. It's present here and now. And lastly, theme also tells our stakes what we can and can't do. If we're learning about, believing in ourselves and standing up to a bully, we should probably be focused on those ideas as opposed to, you know what else is important? Learning how to balance your checkbook. The Karate Kid is not about balancing your checkbook. So theme helps frame our stakes so that they can be a thing or not be a thing. On we go. What do you do if you want to change stakes? This title card is a shot from Rogue One, where the Empire, realizing that the rebels have invaded beneath the shield and are attacking, this is the counteroffensive by the Empire. The stakes change at this point in the story. So let's talk about raising stakes, which is a thing that most of the time most writers struggle with because they didn't start high enough to begin with, or they didn't invest enough in them to make them present. This isn't like, you don't want to think about stakes in terms, I'm trying to come up with a metaphor that really illustrates this. You know how when you shake up a bottle of soda or you see a champagne bottle and you pop the cork and then it sort of geysers out and then it fizzles off and it's, all the fizz is gone. You don't want to treat stakes like that. You don't want stakes to be this sort of thing that's only showing up once, popping, and then fizzling out. You want stakes to be pretty present all the way through, which means you need to be able to, if we can continue our champagne metaphor, you need to be able to summon a new geyser of bubbly champagne pretty much on demand. So you need to learn how to raise those stakes when you need to. So here are the conditions that where stakes increase. The first one is probably the easiest. When there is an increase in the threat or risk to the characters, to the conflict, or the world. When there's more of it. It's not only that, but that's one way to raise the stakes. You don't want to just throw in more bad guys. More goons at the same level are not more higher stakes. It's more goons and somebody's shot or running out of bullets. We don't want to just change quantity of things. We want to change threat or risk. Or, second point, we also want to increase and change the challenge. And there's a new challenge that comes across to our existing status quo. How things are right now is suddenly made more complicated by something. Whatever that something is. Oh, well, here comes the big chief goon and his hands are on fire. Or here, we also discovered that Dr. Jones, there are no more parachutes. When a new challenge shows up and affects the status quo, no matter what the status quo is, don't see status quo and think everything's fine and normal. It's just how things are at the moment. When a new challenge shows up, the stakes increase, period. And if we're going to take that one step further, when the status quo and the expectations from characters involved change in an unexpected way, oh God, there are no more parachutes. Oh man, I'm going to have to crane kick this kid in the face. The Empire is fighting back and we're not going to survive this. When the status quo and the expectations change in a way we didn't really plan for, stakes increase. So let's cover 3 cases that you want to avoid. Because I watched writers hash this out in various pockets of social media, and they're just wrong. Like, they're just missing significant parts of the thinking, or they're just not trying very hard, or they're just grossly ill-informed. Stakes do not increase when you just kill characters, especially if you just kill characters to show that your villain is tough. It doesn't make your stakes increase. Here's an example. So in The Matrix, there's this moment right after Cypher betrays the team where they kill one of the minor characters. I think it's Mouse. I'm not sure. It's the person who wears the white leather coat. They die in front of their friend, in the room with the phones right before the story kind of ratchets up. That doesn't demonstrate and make the villain tougher. It just takes a character off the board. Death, killing a character, does not increase the stakes, especially when that character is really insignificant to the bigger global picture. You could tell that story without them even being there, and you wouldn't lose anything. Your villain is shown as tough, not because of this one thing they did, but because of the accumulated things that they have done and will do. It's never all on one thing. And just racking up a body count does not change the stakes, because the value of the person or the character you eliminate factors into the situation. So if we're a detective solving a crime, yeah, it sucks that there's another body, but if that body is just like, oh, they killed the guy living 2 floors down, weird. Okay. It doesn't, it's upsetting, but my goal over it was to still solve that first murder. Body counts going up does not raise stakes. Even in a slasher horror movie, the only reason why, we can mow down so many nameless Jamook people is because we don't care until it starts killing off the characters we have a pre-existing relationship with. And even then, that doesn't raise the stakes. That raises the anticipation, which is not the same as stakes. We're always trying to stop the masked killer. It's when we discover that the masked killer can only be killed by, XYZ conditions. That's where the stakes increase. Other thing you want to do, or sorry, let's phrase that correctly. Other thing you want to avoid doing. You don't want to raise or attempt to raise stakes by bringing in something new specifically for it. That probably needs some explanation. So let's say you have a main character and they're a badass. Doesn't matter what kind of badass, they're just badass. Picture a badass. And all of a sudden they're fighting something, fighting a guy, fighting a monster. They're kicking ass. And then all of a sudden, from just off to the side, a new thing happens, and the monster is killed not by our cool badass character, but by a new character showing up in the scene. And all of a sudden, that new character, name checks a ton of information. Pre-existing character I have a relationship with. I just killed the monster for you. Now let me info dump you with some new plot stuff. That doesn't raise the stakes. That, in fact, lowers the stakes. It undoes some of your story. A, because it's boring as shit, and B, because you take the agency away from your badass character when a new mentor badass character shows up to dispense justice, wisdom, or information. You don't want to spontaneously attempt to raise stakes just by bringing in new people who happen to know the exact right thing to say that will carry our character forward. It doesn't raise the stakes. You're just adding more pieces to the game. Lastly, and honestly, most common to this problem, is that you don't want to change stakes just because the story feels slow. Oh, things slowed down because you need a scene to happen, or we need an action beat, or the story's paced poorly, or something's missing. Don't just think that, oh, I'll solve this problem by changing the stakes. That's not going to fix, like if you have too many dialogue scenes, for instance, changing the stakes does not fix your overabundance of dialogue. It doesn't make it go away. It doesn't become less of a problem. It just is a new problem in addition to your existing problem. Don't force stuff in. Don't force changes to your stakes just because other problems exist. Don't do it. It's not going to help. That's raising stakes. We most often talk about raising stakes because writers don't raise them proportionally. Well, when we talk about structures of stakes, we'll talk about something called the staircase, which is usually where this problem comes up, that we haven't increased the stakes enough. But that's coming. We're not there yet. For now, let's talk about a thing we don't talk enough about, which is decreasing stakes. How do we lower stakes? Or when is it important to lower stakes? Or why should I give a shit about lowering stakes? Stakes decrease when your pacing slows down. And if you're hearing me say that and your first thought is, I have to hurry my story up, no, that's not what I'm saying. Sometimes it's okay for stakes to decrease. Don't think decrease as, just plummeting to the ground. like Icarus flying too close to the sun. That's not what I mean. It just means you're bringing it down to a new plateau. Again, when we talk about curve structure and staircase structure, this will make sense. But stakes decrease when pacing slows. Stakes also decrease when your story veers away into like info dumps and lengthy explanations and lengthy descriptions and random ass subplots with minor characters. It's really hard to have stakes feel important and a big deal just because we're going off course. Stakes also decrease when challenges in a story are resolved and there's nothing to fill that gap. There's no new thing coming up. And it seems like challenges aren't getting harder as we get deeper into story. Oh, we did the hard thing already. I guess we just have a few small things left. Oh, okay. That's not that big a deal. We've reduced our stakes. What we want to avoid is revolving story elements just to show off that our character can do a thing. Ah, we need a brain surgeon. I'm a brain surgeon. Done. That there's practically no stakes there. You don't want to resolve story elements where the only reason you're resolving something is to show off that your character has a skill on their character sheet. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to come up. Oh, my character is also a world-class, a world-class cello player. Does not mean you need to give them a subplot where they play a cello. You don't need to. You also don't want to bring things up just to resolve them very quickly, just out of the blue, because the reader's going to say, well, you're bringing up, this ancient text or this small cult or this, different object or this different place or people. And then they just go away. Like, I brought them up and we dealt with it. And then off we go. If you don't consider the bigger picture when you introduce things, it's really hard to make the thing you just introduced feel like it matters. Because the reader's going to ask, hey, you were talking about a thing, now we're not. Is it important or not? Because the reader wants to know. If you just introduce stuff and then hand wave it away, the reader doesn't care and the reader won't engage. Lastly, and this is one I think many writers are guilty of, is this idea of your characters, when they react through dialogue, they always have to tell you how bad things are. You don't always have to do that. You can do it sometimes, sure. But you don't always have to remind people. Because if you have to keep reminding them, the stakes actually decrease. Because you start beating the dead horse and the reader sits there and goes, yeah, we know, we get it. It's real bad. It's real bad if the Nazis get the Ark. It's real bad if the Nazis get the Ark. Hey, guess what? It's real bad if the Nazis get the Ark. You want to avoid reminding the reader how bad things are through dialogue. This is not true for thoughts. This is not true for scenes and development and exposition and all that. It's just dialogue. Think about you and someone in your life and something bad has happened. I don't know what it is. You've had a rough day at work, or there's a bill coming up, or you've got a task you don't want to do or whatever. If that person or you spent all day starting every conversation with, here's this bad thing I got to deal with, over and over and over and over again, every conversation you had, the other person's going to get real sick and tired of hearing it, and they'll roll their eyes, or they won't engage with you. And it stops becoming that big a deal, because for all the time and energy you spent yapping about how bad it was, you could have handled it. Don't belabor how bad things are through dialogue. It decreases your stakes. Because if it were really that big a deal, you'd be struggling to do it. You'd be trying. You'd be making an effort. Talking, dialogue, does not do to stakes what you think it does. On we go. Now we're going to talk about the structure of stakes. So there's a couple different ways we can illustrate stakes in story. And my title card here is Alan Rickman, Hans Gruber falling off the Nakatomi building, because it's the high point of the stakes. It's the moment where his plans do not come to fruition and he realizes, oh shit, all hope is lost. That's this moment. And we get to this moment, and this moment feels as impactful as it does because of how the stakes have been structured throughout the story. So we're going to start with the most normal, regular, effective kind of presentation of stakes. It's called the staircase. So to do this, I want you to picture a staircase, any number of steps. I'm only using 4 on the screen because I can only get 4 to fit on the slide. But really, this is just a buildup where we have a challenge or an obstacle or a thing to do. A, B, C, and D. Those are just events we have to happen, bad guys we have to kill, quests we have to resolve, riddles to do, actions we have to take. A to B to C to D. Those are scenes. Those are multiple scenes. Those are chapters, maybe. Maybe one's a chapter and one's a scene. It doesn't really matter specifically, but there's stuff in the story we got to deal with. Once we deal with them, we reach a new plateau, a new status quo, where the stakes stay at a level until we get to B. Now, we might know B is on the horizon. We might know B is on the horizon way back at our starting point, pre-A. But it's not until we deal with the obstacle, deal with the challenge, deal with the whatever the thing is, that we go through it and then reach a new status quo where the stakes can plateau again until we reach the next thing, and so on and so forth, until we would reach the top of the staircase, which is the climax of our story. There will be no greater stair where A to B to C to D has just been adding up. A plus B plus C plus D all the way through. We've built everything up. It's hierarchical and dependent. We can't get to B without resolving A. We can't get to D without dealing with C and B and A. We can't just jump ahead. And then once we get to the top of the staircase, we gradually slope down. We don't just plummet. There's no fall off. We don't just suddenly stop and the day is saved. Hooray. It's a gradual winding down. It's sort of like a cool down after you work out. It's not immediately stopping because that's how, you get cramps and stuff. You just ease off, coast your way to resolution. That's the staircase. There is a reason why the majority of stories use a staircase presentation. It just works. It makes sense. We're used to it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It works. Now, that said, there are human beings who look at this and go, I don't want to do what everybody else does. I want to do my own thing. I want to do a different system because I don't want to be like everybody else. Fine. Here are 2 very not common presentations of stakes. Here's the curve. The curve is a curve, and this gets a little bit hairy to explain, but let's do our best. So picture a curve, an upside down smile. You could also do this as a regular smile curve. I think it's easier to do as sort of a rainbow, but whatever. The highest point, what is roughly the midpoint of our curve, that's our climax. A, B, C, and D still exist. They are still problems, challenges, obstacles, things we have to deal with, and we still deal with them in order. But the amount of danger or issue or challenge that A is, D also is. And the amount of challenge, threat, and danger that B is, C also is. Really, the climax, that midpoint, divides both halves relatively equally. Now, I have 4 things here, A, B, C, D. You could have a million. You could have, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then everything else after the climax. That's fine. I'm just illustrating 4 because it's easier to do it that way. What you want to do in a curve is position your elements of story as being equal to each other, independent of their position in the 3-act structure. So that means you can still have stakes all the way to the end of your movie, even though technically it's the resolution of your movie. A great example of this is the first Saw movie, where the A moment in our example is the realization that there are 2 people chained inside a crummy bathroom. And D, not to spoil everything, D is the revelation that the dead body they thought they were with really turned out to be not a dead body, and that the people are locked inside. And one of them will have to saw their foot off to show up in a later Saw movie. A and D, totally different things happening at two very different points in the movie, but they carry roughly the same size, the same amount of stakes, the same amount of risk, the same amount of revelation. This, just so we're clear, is not a common stakes presentation. It doesn't make it wrong, but it is really hard to do. And for a lot of story structure, for a lot of people in the way they conceive of story, whether it's my hero is going on a quest, or, we just have two people falling in love, or whatever, this structure does not fit the stakes most people build with. And that's totally fine. But when you have a setup where you want a lot of parity, sameness between some elements, while also having a climax high point of stakes, a curve can be useful. It's not what I would reach for right away, but it's a tool in the toolbox. Let's look at one more. This is called the angle. This is most definitely not a standard presentation of stakes, because this is a mess. I don't know how else to tell you this. Imagine the story is a horizontal line from beginning to end. And throughout that horizontal line, we are going to break it up with elements, challenges, puzzles, problems, character interactions, whatever, that rise and fall. And we're going to break them up not in progressively hierarchical fashion. B is bigger than A, C is bigger than B. We're going to vary the sizes all the way through, so that A is one size, B is maybe bigger, C might be smaller than A, and then D is bigger than A but smaller than B. And the only constant there is the climax. The climax remains the biggest element that has a build up, a highest point, and a resolution as the story carries forward. I have it as sort of the end of the graphic on the screen because I didn't know how else to illustrate it. But that line horizontally goes on until the end of the story, essentially forever. This is not, and I want to make this real clear, this should not be your first move, your first goal here for stakes building. This is real hard. It has too many moving parts for most stories. It has too much variance between the sizes of thing. On my graphic here, C is smaller than A, but C is third in line. So it's really hard to understand the value of C. Why is it such a big deal? Why isn't C A? Because we naturally look for things to have that staircase of progressively building and raising and building and raising. And when you start monkeying around with that, you really end up kind of stuck because things feel very disjointed. We don't always want things to feel disjointed. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we're writing a Russian novel in the late 1800s, and that shit was so disjointed, but it was disjointed on purpose. A more modern attempt, because it was not successful, a more modern attempt of this structure were the first 3 to 5 episodes of the Game of Thrones spinoff House of Dragon. I covered the first season of that story on Patreon, and it was not a pleasant experience. It sucked a lot. And one of the reasons why there is a soft reboot, the story just skips time, introduces new characters, and moves things along, is because their early episodes followed an angular stakes model where some things were big deal and some things were a little deal, but not in a hierarchical fashion. You'd get an episode where you'd have small things that were of no import and then a big giant thing. But then the next episode, that big giant thing was not that big a deal because something else undid it or didn't pay it off, or we just plain forgot about it, ultimately requiring them to jump time forward, move things ahead, and then essentially restart the story. The angle method is not common for a reason. It's messy. Can it be good? Can you make it work? Sure, in the same way you can make a curve work. There's nothing wrong with the staircase. You could do that just fine. So let's recap, because I've been talking now for about, what, like an hour and a half, more or less? Yeah, let's recap. Here are the big takeaway points. Stakes are not set in one permanent way like a video game difficulty. They're just not. Your stakes are not always high. They're not always low. Stakes are variable. And stakes are always about potential, the potential risk, the potential reward, the potential ticking clock, the possibility of something happening. Stakes are an expression in the moment more than anything else. What's happening right now in this scene, on this page, in this paragraph, in this sentence? They're an expression of the expectation, the presumption, the discovery, and the effort. Characters are doing stuff right now, right here, in this moment. How bad do they want it? What do they want? Why do they want it? Why are they working? Why are they doing the thing that they're doing? You can split more hairs and get down to, why did you pick this verb to illustrate why the character is doing what they're doing? But that's more of a debate for a different day. That's a whole different topic. We can cover that at some point, I'm sure. But for now, just think, no matter the verb you choose, stakes are an expression in the moment. And stakes should, 99 times out of 100, peak with the climax. Don't yo-yo around. Don't slide the stakes. Don't suddenly bring in, oh my God, the big stakes because I have another book to hook to. Don't. It's gonna make your story fall apart. It's gonna make it seem like you don't know how to write a thing that's cohesive and singular. It's just peak the stakes with the climax. Save yourself a lot of headache. Stakes are not about making things go faster. They're not hitting the gas pedal or suddenly just racking up a body count or, why did this guy die? Stakes. That's not how this works. That's not at all how this works. You can raise stakes just by affecting expectation and changing the status quo. Killing somebody is one way you could change the status quo, but more than likely you're doing it for shock value. Oh my God, they killed that guy. That's not enough of a change to a status quo on a meaningful level, other than it stops you from having to write dialogue for the character or something. Stakes keep the reader reading because they show the character seeking resolution and making an effort to get it. And that's what keeps a reader engaged with the character's journey and effort. It's not just, oh, that guy's so cool. It's, that guy's so cool because he's doing something to get a goal. And I want to see whether or not he gets it. It's not just, I'm going to make the paper doll of my character look really cool. It's about purpose and function and attempting to do that. Stakes really matter. They're real concrete. So, before we get out of here, questions about anything? I have to admit, I was rude before. I didn't say hello to chat. Hello, chat. I hope you're well. I just sort of hit the ground running because this was a big deal to me and I wanted to get this done. And I hope I did a good job. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I've got most of one glass of water left. Hey there. Questions about any of this stuff or about how you can do it in your own story? Anything. I got time. It was a lot. Yes, absolutely. Totally. It was a lot. I know. I apologize, but it's just a lot to cover. The stakes are a big deal, and I want you to do a good job. Shall we get out of here? You want to get out of here? Listen to this again? Yeah, it's a lot. Let's get out of here. Where's my end screen? There's my end screen. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching this. Thanks for checking this out. I really appreciate it. I like when we can break from our regular pattern of answering questions to dive deep on something. I've done it the last couple weeks. We did show and tell. We did some writing exercises. That might happen again next week. Who knows? Depends. Depends on what you want. If you want to make suggestions, if you have some topic you'd rather I talk about on a Tuesday afternoon, you can head over to patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better and suggest whatever you like. I'd be happy to talk at length about whatever you want. You could also, if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, leave in the comments what you want me to talk about. If you want to cover character development, if you want to cover bad guys, if you want to cover plot twists, it might not be an hour and a half long thing. It might be 15 minutes or whatever. That's fine. I don't mind. But I would love to know what's going to help you write better. That's my goal. Now, if you want individual help, if you want to sit down and go through your story, nuts to bolts, wall to wall, no matter where you're at, doesn't have to be a finished thing. Could be a thing you just started. Could be a thing you're stuck on. Could be a first draft that you've been first drafting for, like, I don't know, an ice age, whatever. If you want individual help for free, head over to johnhelpsyouwritebetter.com. Book a free appointment. You got nothing to lose. It's free. It's 30 minutes. And let's see if we can talk about how to help you succeed. I'd be really, really excited to do that. No matter what you're writing, no matter who you are, no matter how far along you are, I just want to help you write better. If you liked this, patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better, the best place to get even more of this on just about a multiple times a week basis, depending on the week. And if you want me in your ears every day, wherever you get your podcasts, head over to John Helps You Write Better. Search for it. It's there just about every day of the week, at least Monday to Thursday. I tend to take Fridays off because I have other stuff to do. But yeah, you can find me in loads of places, including YouTube, where this video will be some point today, whenever the hamsters that run YouTube post it. YouTube.com/John Adamus. All power to all people. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sticking around with this. Thanks for learning. Thanks for trying. And I really appreciate everything. All the likes, all the shares, all the retweets. Thanks for being my audience. It's delightful. The next time I'm here in your eyes and in your ears, let's see, will be next Tuesday, which is April the 2nd. It's already April. Wow. Next Tuesday, April the 2nd, 1 p.m. Eastern. Who knows what we're doing, but we'll be doing something. So until then, go have a good day. I love you. I'll talk to you soon. See ya.